So at my first few years at IBM, I didn't care about my title, my salary, my job location. I wanted to work for people I could maximize learning from. I had planned to or wanted to not just be an entrepreneur, but earn the right to be the CEO of a tech company since I was in college. In a startup, the moment you take venture capital, the clock starts. You have 18 to 24 months to hit the next milestone, or you're not going to get your next round of funding, period.
Hi guys, I'm Max. We're at Purdue and we're doing interviews with founders from our university. And I'm here with Snehal Antani. Snehal and I think we met back in 2023 in the inaugural entrepreneurship reunion. That was like when I was getting first started. Do you want to tell everybody quickly about your background real quick?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated computer science from Purdue in 2002 and started my career at IBM as a software engineer in distributed systems and middleware and that kind of stuff. And then I eventually was a CIO at GE Capital, and then moved out west to be the CTO of Splunk, which is a publicly traded tech company, and then left industry altogether for about 4 years to serve within U.S. Special Operations.
Yeah, I remember you made fun of the fact that, like, oh yeah, you walked away from a big paycheck to go bring people out of, was it Afghanistan? Or?
Yeah, so it's more of just purpose, impact, and solving problems that actually matter. And that was just an amazing experience. But that's where I met my co-founder, Tony. And when he retired from the Air Force and I finished my time in special operations, we started Horizon3 together. And that's where we've started in cybersecurity. In 2020 was our first paycheck. And we launched our product at the end of 2020, the first version of it. We then scaled up pretty quickly to $1 million of revenue within, I think, 9 months of launching the product or something like that. And we're on our way. So we have 300 employees now. We've raised $180 million of venture capital over 5 years and marching towards setting the conditions to build an IPO-able company.
Wow, congratulations. And that's pretty impressive. But how long did it take you guys to build the product?
The actual first payroll, January 2020, before that we had done some experiments to look at, is this thing even feasible? And the whole concept we were going after was AI hackers. So could we build an engine where someone with no skills could point, click, shoot, and hack? And the reason why that's interesting is in cybersecurity, and just in general, when I think about starting companies, I always think about pools of labor I can grab. Because if I can understand the budget dollars I'm targeting, and then the stories I need to tell to take those dollars, and what are the aha moments in the product experience to get the buyer to champion us through their procurement process. If you can really get those three things tight up front, then you're going to have success in building that repeatable sales motion. And so early on it was penetration testing, which is mostly fulfilled by labor, by humans, was one of the last few bastions of labor in cybersecurity. And so initially we built a product to go after where the primary competitors were mediocre consultants. We're trying to replace them with AI-enabled SaaS. And that's how we're able to build that first product. So it took about 9 months to get the first iteration out. But even then it was more early adopter, but we still started to collect revenue because it was better than the alternative. We went from something like 4 customers within the first quarter of selling at like $250,000 of revenue or something like that we got in that first quarter or first 6 months. And then now I've got 4,500 companies using the product. And if we hit our board plan, we're going to go from $1 million in revenue to $100 million in revenue in 4.5 years, which in cybersecurity is as fast or faster than CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Zscaler, all these other pretty legendary and iconic companies. And so it's been fun.
So were you always interested in cybersecurity and defense, or like what was the draw to that?
Yeah, as well.
Was Splunk that?
In general, I've always had a passion for this. In fact, I've thought of and dreamt about building this kind of product since I was 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
And so it's an area that I have a lot of passion for, which is, by the way, important when you're thinking about starting a company. If you are not passionate or obsessed with the problem you're trying to go solve, starting a company is an absolute grind. You have to love the problem you're solving because there are many parts of being an entrepreneur that just aren't fun.
So I had a friend that told me something called founder market fit, not just product market fit. What's your opinion on that?
So founder market fit can mean a few things to a few people. First and foremost, is there a fit between the founder and the problem they're trying to go off and solve? One of the things that worries me is when I run into a person that says they're a founder or an entrepreneur, and they're like, oh, you know, I'm on I've got my 10th or 5th company in the works or running in parallel. And really what they've done is they've tried to bring individual projects to market. And like solopreneur, and there's a thing there, but for me, it's unfocused. If you're trying to build an iconic company, if you're trying to build a company that's going to IPO, which is really what I was focused on doing, building a large iconic company, then you really have to be obsessed with the problem you're solving and have that fit between founder and problem, because you're going to be working that problem for at least 7 to 10 years minimum. And if you are only half into that problem, and 2 years in, you don't want to do it anymore, you can't leave. You're a founder. You've got employees and families depending on you to carry the flag and make sure that they hit their payday also. And so that's the first part of founder market fit. The second part is co-founder fit, making sure you've got co-founders that complement you in the right ways and that are going to be with you through up cycles and down cycles. And then there's early team market fit. There's also investor founder fit.
Yes.
There's a bunch of different dimensions you have to get right.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. So I talk to founders often, and some people just say, like, just get started building, right? Like, what would your opinion be? Because this is what happened with my experience. I found my co-founder first, before I even started my first project, because we pivoted many times, but I felt like that person that I was working with was very important.
Yeah.
Like, was that kind of like the thing that you would advise? Like,
in startups, the idea doesn't matter. It absolutely does not matter.
Yeah,
what matters is the early team.
Yes.
Because that early team has to be able to show they can work together, they can iterate together, they can have hard conversations together. And you might have an idea, but that idea is not going to survive first contact with an early adopter. That early adopter is going to have an opinion, and they're going to want to iterate with you on the concept that you're building. And so a classic mistake I see is founders fall in love with the solution before they've fully understood the problem, and they're not able to iterate with those early adopters to get to that initial early product market fit. And that's really important. And that early team you build is more important than the early idea you've got in your head.
You're focused on B2B. Let's say you're working on a B2C company. When you're looking at, like, let's say an ICP, like an initial customer profile, ideal customer profile. Like, what is how do you go about identifying that? Is it an assumption, or is it like the initial customer profile is a real person you talk to? And then how do you, maybe you have a vision for the product, but then what if the ideal customer says something that is like, it's kind of the idea, but maybe is slightly off from what you were doing? How do founders balance the vision of, like, the vision versus, like, sometimes you give them, I feel like some founders start with an idea and then they just give advice, and then they're told to build a completely different product. And then I was like, when should you listen to that? When should you, like, just reel back? Yeah,
and there's a couple of ways. There's always success stories of almost like religion-based foundings of companies. What I mean by that is a founder has incredibly high conviction in an idea, and they don't care what anyone says. They know they're going to go off and do it. An example of that to some degree is almost SpaceX in the early days, right? There was this crazy vision from Elon to get to Mars, and no matter what, he was going to figure out how to get there. And that, you're going to see those success stories. They tend to pay off really big over a much longer period of time. But for every one successful religiously oriented idea, there's a whole graveyard of thousands of ideas or tens of thousands of companies that didn't work out because they got overly passionate about the idea versus the budget that they're targeting. What I think about is, what dollars am I targeting? Because somebody needs to pay me. And so how am I going to convince that person to give me money for my idea? And that doesn't really matter if it's B2B, B2C, or B2B2C, or all the various combinations. You are eventually trying to take money from an individual. And that person is not going to invent money out of thin air. You need to therefore get them to not give someone else money. And so if you understand the budget dollars you're targeting, so as an example, take Uber, right? People were spending money on cabs. The cab ride experience in New York City was awful. The cabs are dirty, they smelled, they weren't well maintained, the drivers were rude, so on and so forth. And so the budget dollars they were targeting were budget dollars related to what they would have alternatively spent on a cab. And they were willing to pay a slight premium to a cab in order to have a slightly better experience or more convenience. So even in that example of B2C, it's what budget dollars are you targeting? I think that is key to reducing your probability of failure. Because in many ways, early on, it's not about increasing probability of success, it's reducing the probability of failure, because you are, when you start a company, almost destined to fail. right? When you think about the percentage of companies that fail.
Yep.
And now it's all about de-risking
Yeah.
that path to failure.
Sounds good. Sounds makes sense. But I was curious, like, were you always like, did you always knew you wanted to start a company, even in spite of that, or like, I know you had a crazy story where like you told me back when one of your earlier talks where you started like I think a nightclub or like you started running events and then you paid fraternities to run.
Yeah, there are stories that are like Bruno, you don't talk about them. That being one. The point is, I found all sorts of ways to cover tuition. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
But in general, let's think about it in a different way. I was 39 when I decided to start the company, and I did not do that on a whim. I had planned to or wanted to not just be an entrepreneur, but earn the right to be the CEO of a tech company since I was in college. And what's really important in that phrase is earning the right to do so.
Oh, that's interesting.
So when you're, like right now, I'm the founder CEO of a company with 300 plus employees. We're gonna grow to 500 to 600 employees next year. There are a set of skills you have to learn to manage a group of 300 to 500 people. And those skills have nothing to do with tech. How do I handle hiring talent, managing talent, exiting talent if they're not performing, HR issues, legal issues, financial planning, financial operational models. There are all of these things that have nothing to do with the core product that you as a CEO still need to go off and understand. Now, I don't have an MBA. I didn't need one because I was able to learn each of those subjects as necessary and then eventually hire the right people in. But if I didn't know enough about finance, I would not be in a position to ask the right questions or the tough questions of my finance team to understand what was going on. And if I don't have the background to ask those hard questions, I am not going to be able to make the right decisions, especially under pressure. And in a startup, the moment you take venture capital, the clock starts. You have 18 to 24 months to hit the next milestone, or you're not going to get your next round of funding, period. And so it's all about making the most impactful decisions as quickly as you can, because every day the meter is running and you're burning down cash that you've gone off and raised. So every job I took, from my internships at undergrad through kind of my time at IBM to GE Capital and so on, in all of those jobs that I took, every job was a Lego block I felt I needed to earn the right to be a CEO, to run a large organization. And that's really important. I think a lot of founders that they want to start a company at 22 or 23, there's a lot of glamour in that.
Yeah.
But here's the reality. If you're 23, 24 years old starting a company and your company grows to 50, 100, 200 people, and you're starting to raise more serious money, if you have not earned the right to be the CEO of that company, the investors are going to push you out.
What does earning the right look like? Is it like a philosophical thing, or is it
It's experience. It's understanding how to manage teams and business operations in good cycles and tough cycles.
Then I guess the follow-up is for me is what is the difference between a founder and a CEO, and do you feel like maybe certain founders lean more towards one or the other?
So in the ideal case, like for instance at Horizon3, like I'm a co-founder and CEO. And because of my experience over years before I started the company, I've been able to build confidence in my board that I am able to navigate the company through the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. Because when you take venture, or when you're about to raise venture, like I just did a $100 million raise with NEA, which is a tier 1 venture capital firm. In that process, they're evaluating whether I'm actually mature enough and have enough experience to even deploy those $100 million in funding responsibly. And if they don't think that's the case, then as part of raising, they're going to gently and then more directly suggest, we think you should move to always a co-founder, maybe you should move to the CTO position instead, or maybe you should move to the chief product officer position while we go do a search for a seasoned CEO that knows how to scale. So if you can't build confidence with your investors as you raise more and more money in your ability to deploy those funds responsibly and hit the next milestone, those investors are going to de-risk their investment by bringing in somebody else of more seniority that knows how to do it. So when I say earning the right to be a CEO, it's you have the reputation, the swagger, and the experience to instill confidence in the investor that you're going to get them to the next milestone and beyond.
So what do you think about entrepreneurs like, dropping out of college and doing that stuff? Or would you recommend, there's a whole dropout culture in SF. Like even amongst my peers, I know some people like even took a semester off. How should people know when they're suited to be founding a company versus where they should be joining one? And
the dropout culture is a bit, it was made popular with the Social Network movie and Zuckerberg and so on. Once again, for every one successful entrepreneur that was a dropout, there are probably 50,000 dropouts that failed.
Yeah.
And now, what are their options, right? What can they've either going to start the next company, and maybe one of them catches. They're going to use that experience and go join a startup and learn why they failed. They're going to go back to school. In my opinion, maximize your college experience, and part of that experience should be building that founding team through networking with your classmates. One of the things that when you think about your freshman year at Purdue or anywhere, you think if you want to start a company, you're in the find your co-founders business initially. Find people you enjoy working with, you're going to go through up cycles and down cycles with, and then you complement each other in different ways and go. If you think about NVIDIA with Jensen Huang and just this amazing story he tells there's a Stanford entrepreneurship podcast series that Jensen gave a talk back in the mid 2000s or late 2000s or something. And he says he and his two co-founders of NVIDIA met at college. They loved working together. And then they started a company and went through thick and thin after they finished their degrees. And so I think that dropout culture has some glamour and hype, but I think that the number of people that failed and disappeared and struggled afterwards far outweighs the few that have been wildly successful. In my opinion, enjoy your college experience, build the network necessary to have that early team, and build the technical foundation needed to reduce the probability of failure.
So then what was the thing that I guess motivated you to, I do want to share with our audience here, like what your experience with JSOC and all of that. Do you want to tell a little bit more about?
Yeah, I would talk about it in the following way. So I was a CIO at GE Capital and I got to learn. So every job I took, I was a bias towards learning. So at IBM, what I realized early was I needed to build a technical foundation. So at my first few years at IBM, I didn't care about my title, my salary, my job location. I wanted to work for people I could maximize learning from. And that's exactly what I did. And the folks I got to learn from helped me to build expertise in distributed systems and middleware and other really interesting enterprise technologies. And then from there, I took a job that forced me into really high pressure situations. And what I realized was it requires high pressure situations for everything in my brain to click, to be able to really become an expert. Because there's no better pressure as a professional than walking into a meeting with a bunch of customers, like IBM customers, and they expect me to be an expert. And so that fear of failure drove me to make sure I mastered all of the areas I needed to go off and master. And then being able to whiteboard or explain something on a whiteboard or teach a customer how something works is a great way to really solidify in your brain the fundamentals or the principles of a particular technology or topic. After that, when I was at GE Capital, I learned how to lead and manage large organizations, because that's something that GE is really good at training you around. When I was at Splunk, I learned how to scale a sales organization, how to scale a financial organization. And then I left all of that to go serve within the US Special Operations community as the first ever Chief Technology Officer. And I view my time at JSOC as a PhD program in leadership. I got to work alongside the best leaders in the world that the world will never know of, because they are they're just people that you'll never hear about. But
are they like the Type 5 leaders, where it's like it's mission over themselves?
Well, yeah, it's definitely mission first. But when you think about two characteristics in special operations, first is the individual. What makes people in special operations special is not that they can run far, shoot well, or swim fast. It's that they are learn-it-alls that can solve any problem as a team under pressure. That's what makes them special. And by the way, that is the right DNA of an early founding team also. Learn-it-alls that can solve any problem under pressure. The second thing that makes special operations a world-class organization, and they are the best organization in terms of execution in the world, is three characteristics. The first, as a leader, you empower those closest to the problem to get the job done. That's number one, which is, by the way, not normal in most organizations. In most organizations, all the decisions are at the top and they bubble down to the bottom, or they are pushed down. In special operations, it's completely inverted. Those closest to the problem have the most context. They are empowered and enabled with resources to do their jobs, and leadership's there to unblock and get rid of obstacles along the way. The second thing that makes special operations as a world-class functioning team is preparedness, and this idea of shared understanding. Everybody knows what's going on. For those in undergrad, it's hard to kind of fathom this until you're in industry. But in industry, information or knowledge is power. And you end up in a lot of companies where you are protecting your knowledge to build your own little empire. And that becomes internal corporate politics. And your data cartel, your knowledge cartel, is how you start to build your promotions and get your leadership jobs and so on. It's also fundamentally toxic to a high-performing team. In special operations, that is not accepted in any way. There are no knowledge cartels or data cartels, because if one group knows something and the other group doesn't, and they don't share that knowledge with each other, somebody could die. These are life and death situations. And so shared understanding is another key aspect of this high-performing team. And then the third part is cadence. How do you build a heartbeat of execution to make sure everyone knows what's going on, you're unblocking obstacles, and you are holding people accountable for delivery? Those are things I learned in special operations on how to build and execute a high-performing organization at scale. Those all underpin the way that I think about and run Horizon 3 today. And once again, these are experiences that you can't read about.
So what would you say is the biggest learning moment or biggest problem you faced at JSOC that you guys had to face or deal with as a team?
There's all sorts of things that problems you had to go through. Some of the most daunting challenges that you can watch movies and see kind of the context. But what I would say is, in crisis, when something goes wrong, you don't want to learn how to solve a problem in crisis in the middle of the crisis. What you're going to do is build muscle memory ahead of time. You're going to practice and rehearse and train like you fight. So when things do go wrong, it's muscle memory. It's second nature to you. And an example in cybersecurity, for instance, is you don't want to learn how to deal with a breach in the middle of the breach. You want to have practiced it ahead of time so that when things do go wrong, and eventually they will, every single person knows what their job is, what their role is, and they're not guessing. They're not inventing on the fly. They've built that muscle memory. And so when things go wrong, you want to rely on muscle memory to deliver on it. And you can apply that to business, to startups, to crisis, to military, to whatever else. And that's probably one of the biggest takeaways was training like you fight and building the muscle memory to deal with crisis ahead of time.
So then how would you say we can best adapt, say, the qualities of these, the JSOC members to a civilian space where maybe there aren't incentives like life and death, but we still want those values, let's say mutual understanding, sharing information, things like that. Jensen Huang used to run these large meetings with 50 direct reports, and that was very unconventional, but he believed that was the best way to make sure everybody has the same access to information. What would you say, an aspiring, someone like me who's a first-time founder, how would we be running teams like that?
So I'll give you an example, a good example of crisis response and training like you fight in the corporate world. In 2022, I think it was, or 2023, Silicon Valley Bank collapses, which was a really big deal. Now, any startup like Horizon 3, you're going to take an emergency line of credit ahead of time, just from a funding standpoint. So you've got your venture capital funding, say you raise $30 million or something. You're going to keep $1 million, $2 million, $10 million emergency line of credit with the bank so that you've always got this cushion or this buffer. And you want to have that line of credit opened the moment you take a big venture capital fund because you've got the most assets in the bank account to get that line of funding. Now, when you open a line of credit, the bank expects you to consolidate all of your deposits to the bank. Because what happens when you have a line of credit, a mortgage or whatever else, they have a lien on your house. That's why if you miss your mortgage payment, the bank will take your house away. Well, if you have a line of credit in the corporate world, they take a lien on your deposits. So if you don't pay back your line of credit, they're going to go take the money directly out of your account. So now you consolidate all of your deposits in support of having an emergency line of credit, which is a best practice in any sort of founder. Well, As a result, all of our money was in Silicon Valley Bank. So when SVB collapsed, we had no access to our cash. We had millions of dollars in the account. We couldn't access it. Now, that was a Friday morning. The following Monday morning, we had to run payroll. And if you miss payroll by one day in the state of California, you pay $5,000 penalty per employee per day that you miss payroll.
Wow.
That pierces the corporate veil, which means the board members are personally liable for paying that fine. So now what? We have between Friday and Monday, I've got to find enough money to run payroll Monday morning in case my bank accounts are still frozen, and all of our accounts were still frozen. You can't prepare for that ahead of time. But what you can do is have the muscle memory in place with your executive team on how to deal with crisis. So my general counsel understands their line of effort or their lane. My engineering director understands his lane. At the time, my CFO or VP Finance understood his lane, so on and so forth. And so even though it was crisis, we all understood the objective, which was we need to find cash as quickly as we can, while at the same time reducing expenses to minimize money out the door, so that we can execute for as long as possible in this crazy situation of Silicon Valley Bank collapsing. Mm-hmm. While we didn't prepare for that scenario, we had built the muscle memory for crisis across the board. And we were able to smoothly navigate that entire situation and dodge or avoid having to have any sort of payroll penalties. So back to earning the right to be a CEO, back to training like you fight and building muscle memory for crisis. That was probably the best example in corporate of having a mature, responsible team that knows how to deal with bad things.
I see. But then, so I would say that, did you say that like when these kind of problems were also common when you guys were a small team, or like do you think?
I think that, so in startups you go through some interesting phases. Now this was an outlier, but my point is there are always going to be these crazy outliers in the first 4 or 5 years of a company that are company killers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, and it's inevitable that something like that's going to happen. It could be a multitude of things. Early on, when you're a really small company with folks that are your founding team or early founding team, everything's great. You've got cash, you are executing, you're building product. When you have about 25 employees, you're still good. When you jump from, say, 25 to 100 employees, you don't have enough resources to build a robust HR team, human resources team. But so you've got a small company HR, but a big company set of HR problems. You have employees that are going to misbehave. You're going to have employees that are underperforming. You're going to have employees that have to leave on maternity. You've got to navigate local laws, state laws, federal laws for all sorts of employment, and so on and so forth. And if you don't understand how you're going to scale up and build the operational and governance aspects at 50, at 100 employees, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble very quickly with state regulations, with employee lawsuits and whatever. And so at any given moment, you've got to, back to being an experienced founder, you've got to think about the next ridgeline of problems you could run into and then find ways to de-risk execution early. And that's really important as you navigate good cycles, bad cycles, smooth waves, rough waves. And as a leader, as a CEO of a company, as the founder of the company, there's no one else. Like, it's just you. If something isn't getting done right, there's no one else to bail you out. You have to go off and learn that function and figure it out and solve it right there in the moment.
See, that's thinking more like a CEO. You know, it's really funny because I see a lot of builders or early stage founders, they're builders. And then do you know, what would your advice to be people who are like building something, like know when to step back as a CEO or know when to step up? Because it's like, because I think this is a little different. So like in my personal experience, I started a robotics team in my freshman year, which was like Boilerbots. At the time, it was one of the largest, like around 250 people. I built my muscle managing like large groups. I actually learned to struggle when we were scrappy because I felt like, because I kind of joined the team and I already had two people who were able to build the product and all of that, right? But now I'm in my new team and I have to be responsible for that. And I feel like I had to learn how do you identify that initial validator? Because I joined the robotics team at a point where we already validated our market. We already knew what our demographic was at Purdue. And so all I needed to do was build how to scale it. And that was a valuable skill set. But now I'm more learning about how do I find my first 10 customers? And that's very different. But for some people, it's like Sergey Brin and Larry Page, they step back. They had a professional CEO come in, right? So like, when do founders know, like, okay, which type they're in? Or they are both, and they can do both?
It's there are a couple of dimensions to go off and deal with that I see pretty consistently.
Because you're a pretty rare breed. You're doing both.
Yeah.
And that's like I'm very
well,
fascinated.
then there's not either or. You are either like in charge, or you have stepped out of the way to let someone else be in charge. Now, one of the biggest pitfalls that I see is ego-driven. So a founder, CEO is ego-driven and refuses to step down, even though they know they don't have the skills. And those companies get driven to the ground. Another form of ego-driven is not knowing how to delegate appropriately. Because,
please elaborate.
At some point, like my job now is to hire experts in each of these functions. I am good enough in finance to be dangerous, and I was able to navigate the first few years as everything, the CEO, the CFO, the chief product officer, the CMO, like I had all those functions. As I got to a certain point of execution, I had to hire in a chief revenue officer that knows how to build a repeatable sales motion and scale up that team. And it's not ego. I'm going to take that off of my plate and have a specialist, an expert run that function for me. Now, I still have to be close to it to ask the right questions and help unblock or allocate resources accordingly. But I am perfectly happy replacing myself with a specialist. Same thing in finance. I'm going to get to a point, but I am perfectly happy getting that off of my plate and replacing myself with a specialist. Because it's not about ego, it's about company success and being a responsible steward for the 300 families now depending on Horizon 3 to be successful. Because they all have dreams of a second home or dreams of a Lambo or whatever else they want to go off and do. And if I don't keep my ego out of it, and if I don't build the confidence and the comfort to take things off of my plate and hand it to a specialist, we're gonna fail. Because there's only so much I can handle as a single individual. That is true whether you're a CEO and you've got to replace yourself because you just don't know how to get there, and you realize you're really a really good founding engineer and you're gonna hand things off to a professional CEO and you're gonna go focus on building code. Not only could you be a founding engineer, you may not even be a great manager. And you've got to get rid of your ego and just focus on the thing that you're really good at. And oftentimes, ego is one of the bigger reasons why I think companies fail. And ego of the founder and egos of the founding team, because they're not comfortable planning a way to get rid of things off of their plate and replacing themselves with specialists as appropriate.
I see. So then, in your experience, how did you manage, like, what strategy you developed to keep your ego in check? Or like, was it self-awareness? Was it just like, you had great people that you can consult with, that you trust? Like, what was that?
Yeah, it's actually something I learned quite a bit in the special operations community, which is you learn what your strengths are, you learn what your weaknesses are. You learn the areas that get you excited, and you learn the areas that you need to learn, but you don't really are in love with or obsessed with or so on. And actually, even before that, at GE Capital, the way I think about building high performance teams is dreamer, debater, executor. Let's just start there. So a dreamer understands they're really good at building a vision, seeing the future, and generally figuring out how to get there at a high level. A debater knows how to take that vision and turn it into a pragmatic journey to deliver. And an executor knows how to take the steps in that journey, deliver on them while handling ambiguity and uncertainty. Dreamer, debater, executor. And we all have natural biases. I am generally a dreamer debater. Like I am able to think about what I think the future is going to look like. I can generally plot a way to get there. Here's the vision, work backwards or whatnot, and go. And so I naturally surround myself with people that are debater executors, who are gifted at understanding how to take a vision, turn it into a journey, and then how to actually deliver on an operational day-to-day basis. Now, a seasoned leader can do all three jobs. They have to be able to do all three, but we all have our biases. Early on, if your early team is only dreamers, you're gonna have a lot of great vision and PowerPoint, but no ability to follow through. And if you only have executors, you're not gonna be able to see the forest through the trees. And so when you think about even the early team, like between Tony and I, my co-founder, he was naturally a debater executor, and I was naturally a dreamer debater. And so we were able to complement each other from a culture standpoint and from a general expertise standpoint. And then from there, I think about my executive team, and it is a balance of primarily debater executors. While all of them have visions of their function, I naturally, at the executive team level, surrounded myself with debater executors to complement my skills as a dreamer debater.
So then what would you say like people think of, if they want to plan for succession, how they want to think about it? Because like I feel like I heard a management strategy in the book Hard Thing About Hard Things. One of the things that like I think what's his name, Ben Horowitz talks about was that sometimes the visionary needs to build like the team that is the executive team is the one that complements the CEO. But if the CEO steps down, how would you replace that new board? Do you find a new visionary, or do you pick someone who is most senior because they worked longer and then risk the vision just being run to the ground?
That's actually a really hard question. Now, thankfully, most founders, entrepreneurs don't have to deal with that for quite a long time, because the reasons why a founder CEO is no longer the CEO is they couldn't do the job and they were fired, in which case it's a search that the board's going to go off and do to find that. If they're no longer CEO, something bad happened, they got hurt, got killed, got whatever, in which case it's a sudden change, and you need to have that bench of leaders that can step up, or those are usually the two reasons. Now, the way I think about it, even for myself, is if I go on vacation, if I take a week or two off and spend time with my family and my kids, am I required to log in every day to make decisions? Do I have to be available all the time? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, I have not done enough of a job in empowering decision-making authorities to all my key leaders, especially if I'm not available. And so how do I make sure that I understand the decision-making matrix, I understand who has what authority, and more importantly, they understand who has what authority, so I am not the bottleneck. And that's really important.
How do you learn that? Where do you study?
You're not going to learn that in a book. You're not going to learn that in a course.
Okay.
You learn that through experience in industry. And you learn that by seeing where it didn't happen and where it did happen. Now, another example is if you are a leader and if you of a function and you leave for maternal leave or parental leave, like you've now had a child, you're going to go take your time off to spend time with your child. Who on your team do you feel comfortable stepping up to lead the function while you are off being a parent? And if the answer is, I don't feel anyone's comfortable, you have not done a good enough job building the bench of your team. And you should always be looking at folks on your team and saying, who here has the highest ceiling? Who has the most opportunity ahead of them? And how do I continue to invest in growth opportunities for that individual? Who here has plateaued? They don't have a ceiling. They're at their capability limit, but they're a great workhorse. Now that you understand that they're a great workhorse, they're kind of plateaued, you're going to treat them differently. You're going to give them a different set of assignments. You're going to see another person that has plateaued, they're not a great workhorse, they're not going to be able to move up. You've got to manage them out. And you've got to replace them with somebody with a higher ceiling. And your job as a leader is to not define the limits of your people. Your job is to help your people discover their limits and help them grow into bigger and bigger positions. And so for you as a functional leader, whether it's a first line manager to a VP of a function or a CEO, in any given moment, if I step away or in any of those layers, I need to make sure I've got somebody that can take in for me or step up for me on my own team. And if I can't, I have not built the bench. And that's really important in any form of leadership experience as you grow in industry.
I mean, as for management style, I was really curious. What is your opinion on let's say micromanaging versus there's an emerging concept that Brian Chesky coined called founder mode, which is being in the details, working and showing how it should be executed, but you are still empowering them and they said that's actually something a little different from micromanaging, because traditionally micromanaging is it's a black box, you don't know what it is and you kind of just let them go. But a founder is like the biological parent. You can tell what your kid can do. You know where the materials are sourced to build whatever product it is. And then you can show people how it's done. And then once they do it, then they can be empowered. Or do you think founders should still stick with what would you what's your opinion on that, maybe emerging idea?
I would say a few things. The first thing I would say is, in general, if you're a man, and this is why experience matters. If you are a micromanager and you are directing and telling your people what to do, they're going to do what they're asked. And now, if the outcome isn't right, then it's on you. Like, you were the micromanager. You're the one that told them everything to go off and get done. And the problem is that doesn't scale. That might work with a really small team of 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, but it doesn't scale in a team of 10, a team of 20, a team of 50. You cannot micromanage and tell them what to do, because you're one human being. You just don't have the capacity to pay attention to the details. And you're not going to get a scaled output from that team either. The output of that team is going to plateau pretty quickly because they're waiting to be told what to go off and get done. So when you think about founder mode, I think about founder mode as setting the pace. And your job as a founder is to create urgency, but focus of your team. Everyone understands intent. They understand the problem to go off and solve. And you are pushing, by letting your own results do the talking, the pace or the urgency to get stuff out the door. If it can be done in 4 weeks, why can't it be done in 3? If it can be done in 3, why can't it be done in 2? And if we can get into 2, why can't it be done at 1? That's where you think about urgency. Hey, it's going to take me 4 weeks to get this done. Okay, why can't we get it done in 3? Well, it's because I've got these 3 dependencies, and these things are just tasks. Like, no matter what you do, there's nothing you can do to speed it up. Okay, I understand. 4 weeks. Oh, it's going to take 4 weeks, but there's a little bit of cushion. I think I can actually get it done in 3 if you empower me in these ways. Cool, go get it done in 3. I think I can get it done in 2, but you need to empower me with these authorities and give me these resources and give me these other people. Cool, get it done in 2 weeks. I view founder mode as your job is to set clear focus and clear priorities of what you need to go off and get done and why it's important, and basically intent. And then you need to set the pace. And it goes back to my JSOC analogy. You are empowering those closest to the problem with the right resources. You are ensuring everyone knows what's going on, and the pace is the cadence. You are setting a cadence that is the heartbeat or the clock speed of the organization, and going off and executing. And you're able to ask hard questions to minimize drift and rework from what you're trying to get done.
Well, final question. So I would want to ask, well, like, what would your advice be for like people who are just starting out, new entrepreneurs? Like, what would you say about, getting started early versus getting experience first? Because there's an argument for both.
I would say you need to earn the right to be that CEO. Now, there are a multitude of ways to earn the right to be the CEO. Because you've got a rabid following, you're a subject matter expert, or you're able to get to product market fit very quickly, you're a savant in some special way, you're able to thread the needle. There are multiple ways to earn the right to be the CEO. But there are problems that only a CEO can deal with. And in my opinion, you don't want to learn how to solve those problems for the first time in the CEO seat. So it's important to at least have some exposure on HR issues, talent issues, finance issues, all these other functions that are beyond just building code or shipping code that you as the CEO need to go off and understand. Now, you can either figure out how to learn that on the fly, you can find mentors to help you, you can have peer groups. There are multiple ways to de-risk execution because you've got at least exposure to the problem. But in my opinion, I tried to take on jobs and experience prior to the CEO job. So at least I had an inkling of what to go do when I had to go deal with that myself. Because once you're in the seat, it's on you.
So then what would you say is the biggest thing you wish you knew when you first got started? Or what would you do differently when you were 21 right now in today's world?
I would actually not focus on 21, but thinking about when I started the company, one of the big mistakes I made was in hiring and talent. There's actually 2 mistakes that were related. The first mistake was I didn't appreciate the importance of HR and a very strong people leader. And what's really important there is your chief people officer or your VP people or your HR leader or whatnot. Their job is to help you build a responsible way to recruit people, hire people, onboard people, ensure their success, manage them out. They're also play a key role in preserving and scaling the culture of the company. And I didn't appreciate the role of that HR function early. So I ended up scaling from 25 to 125 people over a very short period of time. And we ended up hiring managers that within a few weeks of them starting had to go hire more people. And they did not understand the culture, the problem. They weren't indoctrinated in Horizon 3. And so the people they hired, about 30% of them needed to be let go. And hiring somebody and then letting them go within 6 to 9 months is one of the most expensive things you can do as a company. And it's because I didn't appreciate the process of hiring at scale. So as I learned that lesson, I brought in a world-class chief people officer that was able to build out the infrastructure, the hiring manager capacity, the onboarding, and so on, for us to responsibly grow from 100 to 300 and now 300 to 500 people, while preserving the culture, scaling the culture, making sure even individual contributors are fiercely enforcing the culture. And it's not just top-down driven, but everyone has ownership in the identity of the company. And that's super important. And once again, as you're trying to build something iconic.
Got it. So earning the right to be a CEO is, would you say, it would be the line of the day, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, Snehal.
Sure thing, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. We are Build Purdue, and if you guys are interested in our content, we'll have more like this, where founders like Snehal can come on, and you can follow our Instagram and YouTube to get more content like this.